Welcome to something a little bit different. So back when I first started making YouTube videos and before I knew really what kind of videos I wanted to make, something that I used to talk about was my experience growing up as a Romani gypsy. A lot of these videos I have since privated or taken down completely simply because I didn't speak particularly well on camera back then. And in spite of the fact that I haven't really spoken about this much since, it is still a big part of how I view myself, how I view society, and how I view somewhat politics. Something else that I've talked about here and there in various videos is my love of languages. And over the Christmas period, I had an idea, partially inspired by the Chronicles of Alex series, to make a new series that would be as anecdotal as it was educational. And what this series will be about is a heavy dialect that I grew up with called Angloromani. Now you will have seen this term, Angloromani, in the title and thumbnail of this video, and chances are that you probably already know what it means, and if not, then you've likely gleaned what it is all about by now. But let me break it down anyway. Anglo refers to English, and Romani refers to the Romani language of the Romani people, otherwise known as travellers or gypsies. So I'm going to presume already that you understand at least what English is and how it works. Something worth mentioning about English is it is referred to sometimes as the bastard language, having been smashed together from elements of Middle French and late Anglo-Saxon during the Tudor period. Something that is commonly attributed to, if not Shakespeare, then at least the time period that Shakespeare was writing in. Now, as for the Romani language, to understand the Romani language is to understand Romani history. And I don't want to get too bogged down in this, so I'll summarize it. Effectively, about 1,000 to 1,500 years ago, an itinerant group of people from the Rajasthan area of India started to gradually migrate through the Middle East and then up through what would have been the Byzantine or Ottoman Empire, up through the Balkans into Russia, or going more directly into the Balkan Peninsula, where they somewhat settled, and that's why they often get this idea of them being Eastern European. They're not. I will get onto that later. Before eventually migrating further west into Western Europe, and eventually from there into Britain, some point around about the early 17th century. By the time they arrived in Britain, the language that they had started out with had changed dramatically. What had happened was they'd started out with this language that would have been from the sort of Indian family of languages, based maybe in Sanskrit or possibly Urdu or something along those lines. And along the way, they had dropped some of their words and picked up other words. They dropped this, they picked this up, and so words would just continuously get sort of changed out for more localized words of the places that they were stopping by in. And so by the time they arrived in Britain, the Romani people had effectively the ultimate of magpie languages, having borrowed words from pretty much every tongue they had come across. And English, being the bastard language that I mentioned it was earlier, probably would have been just perfect for the Romani people of that time to blend their language with. And so by the time we get to the 19th century, there is something called Anglo-Romani, very commonly used. And it would be continues to be commonly used well up until the 1960s, I would say. From the 1960s onwards, the language effectively started to die off, and it started to become more of a dialect than anything else. But this dialect is still around today and was still very heavily used in the family that I grew up in. It should be said therefore that seeing as this paralanguage was effectively extinct long before I was born and was nothing more than a dialect, this series is not going to teach you how to speak a language. What this series will teach now is the Romani history and Romani culture through the lens of language. I would also like to add a couple of other stipulations. Firstly, don't think that you can use these words that I'm going to teach you in this series to go and strike up a conversation with your local group of gypsies that have pitched up in your town or happen to live in your town. By definition, and through learned experience and through basically survival experience, Romanis tend to be very cagey. Especially if they sense that someone from the outside, a gorger, is going to try and be chummy with them in any kind of like outward way. I mean, maybe if you're already friends with a family, then by all means, you know, ask them about some of the words that come up in these videos. But this then brings me on to my next point. The vocabulary of Romani gypsies in the British Isles varies wildly from like location to location, from county to county, from those in Wales to those in England, from those in Kent to those in Cheshire, and also between families. So I can only really give you the experience and the vocabulary that I have grown up with. That being said, a lot of the words are shared, and if they have been changed, they usually haven't been changed by much. Now, for how this series is going to work. In each video, I will pick a particular theme, a particular grouping. Could be household terms, it could be animals, it could be verbs. You kind of get the idea. And I'll be looking at which words I grew up with personally and the semantics and the context in which they were said. And then I will then be looking at the etymology of those words. Very occasionally, I will refer to a dictionary compiled by the Romani project, a project very helpfully set up by the University of Manchester that has compiled a list of the words used in Britain and which families, which locales use them, as well as some etymology. No, not all the etymology, in which case I will probably be doing a fair bit of digging myself before each video. Now, I hope this video has been a fairly comprehensive introduction to the series, but if I have missed anything, please let me know any questions you might have in the comments. I'm very excited to get started with this series, but I knew that before I started it, I would have a lot of sort of groundwork that I wanted to lay, and so that's what this video has been about. And I thank you for your patience of sitting through it. I also hope that people will refer back to this before watching much of the rest of the series. But now that I've made this introductory video, I'm hoping that I can just go straight into making the other videos how I want to make them. By saying, hi, my name's Pricey, these are the words we're looking at today, this is what they mean, this is their etymology, this is their cultural context and history. But like I say, please let me know if there is anything that you feel that I've missed out in the comments. And until the series begins, have a good one.